Okay, well, in that scenario, let's go ahead and get started. So as a reminder, please remember that this is a recorded call. And if anyone has anything that they want to talk about that is not on the agenda, please feel free to add it. So getting started. So we have a few recurring calls. We have this call. We have the NSM document call, which we may switch to monthly. And we have the NSM use case call, which occurs every second, fourth, and fifth Monday of each call. Prem, do you know if that's going on this next week, or is that?
Yeah, I think we should have it next week. Yeah.
Okay, so we should be on for next week then.
Yeah. I will also check with Ramki because Ramki is traveling, and if not, probably I'll try. I'll probably organize it. Yeah.
Cool.
This Nikolai. So Prem, we have identified with Jeffrey and the others that essentially for the doc call we will lower the frequency like once a month. Do you think we should reconsider the use case call also in similar fashion, or?
I think we can do. Currently, I think it is twice every month, alternate weeks. So we can. I'll probably check with Ramki too on that, and then we can probably move it to once a month. Yeah.
Yeah, it's up to the both of you in terms of how you want to run it. So if you feel that the community is getting a lot out of the current cadence, then feel free to keep it as it is. If you feel that it needs to be reduced, then feel free to reduce it.
Sure, sounds good. Yep.
Okay. So in terms, there's also a CNCF telecom user group, which occurs every first and third Monday at 8 a.m. Pacific. And so we just had one this last week. We have the CNCF networking working group, which occurs every 2 weeks on Tuesday at 9 a.m. And there is so in terms of events, we have DBDK user space, which I have a talk that was accepted into that. So that's on the NSM and DBDK, and in terms of what's going on there. We have in September 19th and 20th, there is a open core summit in San Francisco. I don't think anyone has reached out on that, primarily because of, at least on my part, I'm based in San Francisco. I think I'm the only, well, rather, from the NSM committers, I'm the only person who is based in this area. But perhaps we can get someone else who's heavily involved in the community. So, like, Prem, you've given talks on NSM. Is that something that perhaps you can reach out and see if you can organize, or do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, actually, this is organized by Joseph Jacks. So he reached out primarily for the participation. I think probably that's a good idea. We can probably see if we can present also.
Cool. Let's see.
So we can probably discuss it over sometime this week. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. And so we'll see if we can get a hold of them and see if we can reach out. Okay, so we have ONS coming up September 23rd to 25th. So I know the X Factor CNF talk was accepted. Do we have the status on the others?
I think Ralsov talk about kernel was also accepted, and mine for ASMI, and the other Nikolai's talk with Tyler.
So all the talks were accepted.
Seems like that. Yeah.
Yes.
If there were 4,
cool.
if there are more.
Okay, cool. And so we should see the schedule announced pretty soon if it's not up already. Let's see, on October 8th, we have the Cloud Native Revolution by Comcast Labs. Does anyone have any information on that?
I added that. This is Lucina, and I only heard about it this morning, and it looks pretty interesting. The CFPs are open until August. It's a one-day event held by Comcast Labs, and it looks like Comcast is looking to start using cloud native functions. So there's a track on microservices and CI/CD, for example.
Nice. And that is on October 8th. So we'll take a look at that as well. We have Open Source Summit, which Nikolai has and Radoslav and Ivana have talks that have been submitted. So we should hear about those in early August. And we have EdgeCon with Ivana's talk accepted in November 14th through 15th.
Yeah, they don't have schedule yet. So we're waiting to check the date, but it's there.
Nice. We have KubeCon coming up on 18th through 21st. And so we have a few talks that have been pushed in, or rather that have been submitted in. So we'll see if we'll see which talks get in on that one. So we'll know more soon on that. The announcements should be in early September. There was a co-located event with EnvoyCon. I need to check that there was a team that had reached out about Istio that was thinking about and putting something in with, not Istio, sorry, with Envoy. They were talking about putting something in with EnvoyCon. Nikolai, do you know if they ended up submitting into EnvoyCon?
I haven't received anything from them more than that. I don't know.
Cool.
But,
I'll reach out and I'll ask.
Yeah, I mean, in any case, they are probably going to reference to our examples, or probably will build something on top of that, or maybe on their own. But the fact is that NSM is there, so that's good.
Yeah, and there was a talk that was pushed in the main KubeCon session, so I know that for sure. I just don't know if the EnvoyCon one was submitted. So.
Huh. Okay.
So I'll ask them about it because they were thinking of doing that. We have Edge Computing World from December 10th through 11th. So I'll ping the guy who's organizing that to see if he has any further details published already, because time's running short for him. And we also have Edge Congress on November 6th in Austin. So we don't have any details listed, so we'll have to circle back on that. We have, when we are ready, we have a call for demos at the Kubernetes community meeting, which occurs every Thursday. Demos are booked out a month and a half or more out, or about a month out. So we need to give them a little bit of ramp up time to submit. And with that, I think that pretty much covers our events. So, social media community team, Lucina, you have the floor.
Good morning, thank you. Yay, well, last week I wanted to meet the goal of 300 followers by today and exceeded. We've got 305 followers as of this morning. Hooray, so thanks everyone for your support. And that's before a 010 release, so that's really great. Can't wait to see what happens when we go forward. So that's 23 in a week, and I followed about 83 more accounts. I'm surprised I'm even finding any more related folks, but there's a lot of folks in this space, and just keep using the Twitter who I should follow recommendations. And posted and retweeted 24 times this week. There's a lot of interesting news. So today, the 300 followers, I posted a thank you post. Last week, posted a reminder about the telecom user group. This week, there was a press release out of Verizon and Ericsson, first in the world to introduce cloud native technology in their live wireless core network environment. So retweeted that. Also retweeted a post that says, now is the time for telcos to adopt cloud native microservices. That was a pretty interesting article. I've been retweeting from the LF events, LF networking, CNCF projects, and CNCF, Open Source Summit, and Tungsten Fabric. Week, I'll announce the state of DPDK, Network Service Mesh, and any other news about DPDK event. Do more liking and retweeting relevant and related topics. I always search for mentions of service mesh, network service mesh, cloud native networking. I'll post about the upcoming events and announce the first release when available. Is there anything else you'd like me to share on the @nservicemesh Twitter?
At the moment, I can't think of anything that we need to blast out at this point. Eventually, I suppose one thing we could talk about is once the ONS schedule comes out, we could post something on that. But no, I think you've been doing a fantastic job. So yeah, thank you very much.
Wow, thank you. Yes, my pleasure.
So we have the OVS Orbit podcast, which we are going to do today.
In a couple of hours.
In a couple of hours.
Yeah. Finally.
So. Cool. So I think for the agenda, we can remove the KubeCon talks because there's no action items. We'll be able to take on that for the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So Nikolai, did you want to talk about the white papers?
Yeah. I don't think that we have discussed, or maybe I have skipped a couple, so I don't know if this has already been discussed, but because there's these white papers going on and a couple of us are attending and participating, I know that Jeffrey is one of the lead persons, although he's not here, I believe. Jeffrey, you're not? No. So essentially there are two white papers. One is more, let's say, TUG centric, and the other one is more, it's supposed to be like more of service provider centric, at least as a starting point. So I would really like to have some discussion within our community and how we want to position ourselves there. I mean, are we perceiving ourselves as and are we actually looking for being the one of the main drivers there? Do we want to push NSM somehow deeper into the ecosystem and kind of from the white paper point of view, or we somehow want to just be one of the many possible solutions. And as an example, I will give ONS, because this is the hot news that actually a couple of our talks were accepted. So essentially I'm on two talks. One is with Fred, which is about the X-Factor CNF, and the other one is with Taylor, which is about enabling NSM in the CNF testbed. So I guess that on both talks we'll be okay, especially on the X Factor CNF, we'll be approaching the topic and the subject from NSM point of view. So like when you talk about CNFs, more or less we'll assume the capabilities, and this is not discussed with Fred. I mean, this is something that I'm trying to figure out myself. But I guess that we're going to approach it from the fact that there are some paradigms that actually NSM is putting forward, and I don't know, Fred, if you would agree here, but I think that this is how we are going to approach the talk, saying that okay, even if you give an example, you're just going to say okay, or I'm going to say okay, so you have the endpoint, then you can chain it to this something else, then you can have the network service being composed out of smaller endpoints. All these concepts that we are putting together and implementing within NSM, we're going to put forward in this talk. And I was thinking, should we have the same approach when we approach the white papers? Should we kind of take these assumptions that we make here and these claims that we say this is our way of approaching the problems? Because I think that it changes somehow the overall picture. Like we are more or less focused on a particular solution to this problem, and that's what we implement here. I believe that it's mostly right? I mean, we probably do some things that when we start deploying in production, we'll figure out that there are some things to change in our ideas, but I think that we're mostly right. So getting back to the white papers, are we approaching this from this point of view, or we want to be a little bit more accommodating to other ideas, let's say?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that are going to come up throughout the white paper that I think are going to turn into wedge issues. So a couple of them are the most important ones. I think are what's going to happen with the resource management. So one topic is the resource management, like how do you actually inject things into the kernel? What configures? So our pitch has been to use device plugin for injecting special pieces of hardware in, and we know that there's issues around that. So that's something that will very likely come up. But another one with what it's going to lead to as well is, this is quite understandable because a lot of vendors, they want to take what they've already created and they'll want to run that within a pod or within a VM that interacts with Kubernetes and then call it cloud native. And yes, it may run in Kubernetes, but if it's still very imperative, or it doesn't follow like the standard like cloud native declarative style, then we're going to run into issues with that. And so I think part of the goal in this scenario is going to be how do we convince the community that cloud native is more than just a lift and shift. This is not like a PNF to VNF use case. This is equivalent to back in the applications when we were first moving to Docker. How do we move applications from being giant monoliths, which you just stick in a container and then deploy and say, okay, I'm containerized now, to actually building to Kubernetes and being able to leverage Kubernetes strengths, because the end result is if you just do a lift and shift and you're not ready for the paradigm, is you end up recertifying you end up having to put a huge amount of effort in learning and training and you don't get the benefits of Kubernetes because you don't you haven't adapted to a cloud native world. So I think that's where the biggest issues are going to be around this. And I think some of the things around like binding by payload, loose coupling, drive towards that environment. So I think that's where the real benefit that we can try to push is to say, hey, don't just do a lift and shift. Like actually redesign your re-architect, redesign your system, and start to. It doesn't have to all be at once, but to move towards a more cloud native environment. Does that make sense?
Yes, and this has been something that we are discussing over and over again, and I mean that's okay. I mean, I don't have any objections here, but for example, yesterday Dan came up with a link, and then we discussed, I don't remember the name of the guy from Ericsson, that they are deploying in, I think it was Verizon. They have a cloud native, MME, I think it was. So essentially they're saying, okay, we can do this with Motus and it works, and we don't really need all this dynamism. I mean, they're not saying that, but that's what actually reality shows us. So I mean, if we're approaching and then we want to say all the things that you're saying now, we really need to go with some strong case where actually NSM is really needed, because the best thing about NSM in this case is that it's dynamic. I mean, like in this specific case that Ericsson are demonstrating, that's essentially you deploy it once, then you use Motus to just statically, connect all the interfaces. I guess it's SRLV and whatever, and you connect your data plane to the SRLV, and then, I mean, you don't move this much, right? I guess that. I mean, this is not criticism to their solution. This is like people are already showing some real world solution that works with the existing technologies and doesn't really, I mean, it does its job without really using the nice things that we can offer here. So if we're going to the white paper, we need to come up with a strong use case, use case, and so business logic behind it, saying, yeah, I mean, if you deploy this, then you will save this amount of effort, this amount of money, even if you can map it, operations, whatever. But we need to come up with something really strong. Otherwise,
yeah, I agree with that. And
so I can probably add to it, just to give a bit about this topic. I started this, I in fact gave a talk about moving to Microsoft-based CNF around like 2017. The reason was I validated some of those use cases and the benefits with some of the tier 1 service providers. But by and large, the issue here is a couple of things. One is today, as we speak, the industry, there is a real need for such architectures because the whole infrastructure has to be dynamic, and then it has to essentially be ready to accommodate some of the use cases. And also 5G pretty much drives this requirement, I would say. So what I was thinking was, probably we can just take a use case or a bunch of use cases and then probably highlight some of the benefits on how this new architectures, particularly cloud native, will help out in realizing those use cases would be a good input to it. And also probably I can share the slide which I presented during the last ONS, whereas the whole concept was you would need to go for a composable infrastructure, and where I was talking about the custom resource definition and how Kubernetes can be leveraged to do it. So, and my focus was again towards use cases on some of the 5G use cases, and then trying to see how we can leverage it. So by that, what happens is there is a real value or benefit that would come out of when we pitch in these architectures.
Yeah, I think there's two thoughts come to mind as well. So one of them is I think Taylor put it quite well, talking about stuff that was in band versus out of band. So all of the configurations with that when they were working with Multis, a lot of the configurations had to be done out of band. They had to touch the various CRDs directly to specify IPs and subnets and various other things. And so we can, that's one area where we can help is provide that dynamism. And once you have that process automated, then you can do more interesting things like auto healing and similar stuff. So I think we'll be able to push in that direction. A second thing as well is don't make the assumption that whatever technology that they went with for the initial version is going to be what they finally decide to deploy in the long run, because this would have been an experiment for them. What works, what doesn't work. And my intuition on this is that there may be room for additional experimentation that they may be willing to do. So if we engage them and try to collaborate with them, it's possible that we could convince them to give NSM a try and show them how and show them the benefits that we bring to the table. So I think we should keep our eyes open for the opportunity to collaborate and see if we can do something with those particular teams so they can validate what so they can validate between, like, should we use NSM, should we use Multis, or so on, and see if they can get benefit out of it.
Okay, I have a quick question to Prem. So you were talking about composable infrastructure. Can you give a specific example why this would benefit a service provider? I mean, why would they need this composable infrastructure?
Yeah. Okay. So here is what it is, right? So particularly with respect to 5G, it's the same network infrastructure, but it has to provide you, or it has to support a lot of different use cases. The use cases meaning, for example, we are talking about ultra reliable low latency. We are talking about massive IoT. It's going to be the same infrastructure that has to be providing the support for that. So in that case, what is important is, of course, the concept of network slicing comes into picture. And in order to realize network slicing, you would need to dynamically move the workload from, say, for example, from your central office to that of an edge cloud, and then try to realize that. And then probably once the use case is satisfied, you would probably be ready to satisfy to other use cases, right? That is number one. Number two, also the users are changing, wherein the request from the users would be dynamic. For example, dynamic instantiation of services, right? What dynamic instantiation of services mean is that the infrastructure is assumed that it has to meet the service SLAs as well as the needed requirements. So all of it would essentially mean that the whole infrastructure has to be composable. When I say composable, you'd get in terms of the intent, and the intent has to be directly translated into what is that is needed by the infrastructure, right? So that is where the concept of composable infrastructure comes in, or it plays a very important role, right? So now I can probably just give an example, right? So, for example, in a particular area, someone wants to bring up, say, 100, say, or 100K subs, right? Meaning subscribers, right? So in that case, in the erstwhile world, wherein when things are static, you would essentially need to create the network functions, which is essentially be a physical network function or a virtual network function, and then it would essentially take, like, for example, few months to get the infrastructure up and ready, right? But now when we talk about these new use cases, they would need these services to be immediately available, right? So how do you realize is the first question. So to realize that, what you can do is you can always containerize all of these network functions, and then probably put it in terms of Helm charts, and then probably instantiate. Give me a second. Let me share you the slide so that it makes easy for people to follow. Can you give me a
Ivana,
second?
please.
So here you go. Let me know when you're able to see the screen.
Yes, it's here.
Okay, let me go to that specific use case here. Okay, so here is an example, right? So for example, the intent would essentially set up fixed broadband for, say, X customers, right? Now let's assume it's all based on containers, it's all Helm. What I can do is, I know that to satisfy this intent, these are the 5 say network functions that needs to be instantiated, right? So what I do is I would essentially pull it from the Helm charts, and then I would essentially instantiate it via Kubernetes. Now, depending upon my previous data, I know what has to be the current state and what has to be desired state, and then it would essentially automatically go and instantiate, right? Now this is with generic Kubernetes, right? So as a next step, you can also make it like custom resource definition, wherein Kubernetes knows how to handle it, and then the controller also gets modified so that it can know how to handle this, right? But by and large, the idea here is very, very simple. You would essentially need to look at these network service functions to be like composable components, and you would essentially compose your function, because, for example, this is quite common in the network service mesh world, right? Because, for example, the network service, whatever you would offer, would essentially differ. For example, if it's going to be a secure internet, it would mean that I would have a firewall, I would have a DPA, and then instantiate it. The same secure internet would mean a different context and different scenarios, right? So what I mean is, the network services can readily be defined, and then it can be leveraged when you compose your infrastructure. So that's the underlying theme of the idea of what we call as composable component, and how Kubernetes as well as some of the NSM world comes and helps you out.
So can we then, just to conclude the topic maybe, because probably it's too long, then getting back to the white paper, can we then just say that the very first attempt to apply to implement the CNF concepts are more or less static and not that dynamic, and with technologies like NSM, essentially you are able to be a lot more dynamic and a lot more declarative, so that essentially you enable more use cases and this composable infrastructure, which is more or less the foundation of 5G implementations in the future.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, that's good.
Let me stop sharing.
Yeah, there's a couple other things in terms of like in terms of where we sit that we're able to really help. And so one of the big problems that Multis has is that when it runs, there's no file system available. So when you try to, if you want to run something that's shared memory based, you have to be able to mount the inode somewhere so that you can then access it. And so when CNI runs, there's literally nowhere for that mount to occur. And so you end up having to do out of band, some significant out of band configuration in order to land faster device access. And so there's a couple areas where this may not be entirely true. Like if you want to stick in a device, then you can use device plugin to land that device directly into your into the file system. But when CNI runs, it runs it runs before all of that has been set up. So if you wanted to do some set of configuration to that device, CNI is not the right place to do that. And Multis is a CNI, so it's going to run into the various limitations of CNI itself when this happens. Because the only thing that CNI has access to is it has privileges and it has access to the network namespace of the pod. So it knows what the network namespace of the pod is. So we end up avoiding a lot of those issues. And so I think I think that when we start talking about it, I think in more detail, we'll be able to bring some of these interesting work that we've brought up into the fray, and we'll be able to win support with those on a technical level as well. But it's not just like, oh, Multis just needs more work. It's like Multis is playing in a space that requires significant changes to Kubernetes in order to make it work, which some of those patches have been submitted in. One of the big ones was there was a device plugin and device plugin and CNI patch that was sent in, and that one was actually blocked by Clayton Coleman, who is I think the chief architect of OpenShift over at Red Hat, because of the complications to Kubernetes that it would bring. So that's another area that we're able to talk about, is like how we're able to do this kind of stuff in a cloud native way without significant changes to Kubernetes. And there's a couple areas where there's no solution that has been brought up yet, or at least none that is solidified. So the biggest one where there's still an open hole across the board is going to be around SROV NUMA alignment.
Yeah.
And there's some interesting work being done by Intel in the topology manager, which may fix this. Yep. So
I hope that.
Yeah.
Am I muted? No. I hope that we are going to hit some of these and probably tackle and test some solutions with the CNF testbed. Yeah, that's actually.
But sorry, Nikolai, it's done. So I think that's the goal. So we had a lot of work to clean up the mess of which white paper to write and what kind of white paper to write. So we kind of handled that now. The next part was actually to be able to discuss and look at all the technical issues and the feasibility and which makes more sense. And I think by discussing it and exploring those and using the CNF testbed, that's the purpose, to be able to actually highlight those who actually makes more sense on the engineering side and the feasibility side. And me as an end user and operator, that's what I want from that white paper. I don't expect there will always be a single solution. I think by design, there will always be some sensitive or emotional attachment to some technologies. In the industry, it's always been like this. So that's about common sense and requirements and features and gaps are going to be shown so that we actually know which ones make more sense. And it's not going to be back to the emotional state of deciding which technology you pick and choose. So I think there's a lot of potential through that work and through that effort of figuring out those gaps to see, well, this is already covered through NSM. This NSM can easily provide or adjust. So I think that's the best framework to prove it out.
Yeah, and I actually see I share the same view. I think that we're going to hear a lot of noise until we actually start sticking these things into test beds and comparing them side by side. And once we do that, I'm confident that NSM brings enough value to the table that that it'll end up dominating the space, at least in the corner that NSM plays with. But we're the only way to really get that message out is literally going to be go implement it, go find out what the problems are. And this will be good regardless. Like even if it's even if it was not NSM that won out, it'd be good to get this type of thing out anyway, because in the long run, we're looking for a solution to cloud native networking problems. And so whatever that solution looks like, we're not going to really know what works or doesn't work across the board as a community until people actually have a way to see this in action, and not only see it in action, but be able to replicate it. See, I think that's one of the big drawbacks to the Ericsson and Verizon one, is that we can't go check out on Git, go buy the hardware to build a lab, and then go install it and run it and see what works and what doesn't work. So I think the testbed that many of the people here have been working on is absolutely crucial to that. So, yeah, I think the sooner we get that, the better.
And I think one other thing that would be important is also to get some CNF that can be hosted on network service mesh, so that from a testing perspective, at least we can show the world that this has been tested with the CNF.
I agree, and I think this is where right now, initial stage, we're going to see a lot of challenges, because I think from my viewpoint is right now we don't really see CNFs which are truly decomposed from the underlying infrastructure. So you see most of the CNFs have found ways that are being proposed to us. I've found ways to have like hooks to a specific kind of hardware design or platform design, meaning that if you want to be able to be truly composable and platform agnostic, we're not there yet. And that's where it's challenging to say to have a vendor XYZ give me your Helm chart or your QA image to your CNF. Not there yet. Yeah, and that's a challenge. That's going to be the first challenge. I think it's the first challenge we're going to face, is being able to say, hey, your workload should be agnostic, whether I run on a VMware version of Kubernetes or OpenShift or something else. I had NSM or not, you should be agnostic to it. And that's the first big challenge I'm seeing coming.
Yeah, fully agree with you. And one question I have is, would Clearwater IMS be of any help? Can we start looking at it so that, because they do have some Docker image, and they have, in a way, I don't know fully, but they have containerized it. So I was just curious. I started looking at it, but it was quite complex. So just wanted to get your inputs.
What is that? Can you put a link?
Yeah, sure. I'll put it. Yeah.
Can you just put it in the doc so that we have it recorded for?
Yeah, I'm just going to put it in the. Yeah, here
okay.
I'm just first putting it in the chat, then I'll soon put it.
Good.
This is what I meant. The Clearwater IMS and.
Oh, Clearwater Docker. Okay. Wow. How packet intensive are these systems, the IMSs?
I
mean, are they?
So I just started with this, but then it's quite complex. So that is where probably if we can get some, I mean, probably we can try to load it in our CNF test bed and then see if we can.
Okay. Yeah, let's.
Shall I put it in the after this?
Yeah, please. So I wanted to quickly mention the multi-cluster PR that we actually, it's called the interdomain. Should be interdomain. So this has been a fantastic work going on by Artyom, and it's something that was going on for a while. As you can see, a lot of commits here. But today it was announced that it's ready for merging and it passes tests and etc. And I think that this is a huge milestone for NSM because when I joined the project, it was available like back in late October last year. It was only available to do single host. Then for KubeCon North America 2018, we were able to enable the multi-host like VXLAN connectivity, multi-hosts, and now we're talking about like this is, I don't know, 7-8 months later, we're talking about interdomain, meaning multi-cluster, being able to spread services and consume them and declare them in different Kubernetes clusters. I think that this is a huge milestone for us. I mean, it will probably take a while until this gets in. It will probably take a couple of iterations until it's stable, but still, we have something that is passing tests and it's great. Thanks to all the guys that are working on this. Andrei, if you are around, then you can say a couple of words because I don't really know what's the actual state there. But if you know more. Is there anyone from Zort on the call?
Yes, hi.
Yeah.
Andrei is not on the call, yes, right now. So,
okay.
As far as I know, status is it's mostly ready, and I think it needs review from somebody. So.
Yeah, it will need. Yeah, probably some more work here. I put some comments around documentation, but yeah. Other than that, it's great that we already have this, and it's probably again one of the unique features that we can offer to the world. You know, being able to interconnect workloads is not as trivial as people would like to today. Okay. I don't have anything else.
Yeah, we're coming up to the top of the hour as well, so I think we should probably end it here. And yeah, just for one last comment on the interdomain stuff. So I think this is one of the areas that's going to be incredibly powerful for us. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the interdomain stuff come up with its first full iteration. So like definitely amazing work for that team. And with that, is there any last agenda items we want to cover before we finish? Or any last announcements? Okay, well, with that, thank you everyone for attending, and we will see you all again next time at this next week at the same time. You all have a good day now.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.